Hello and welcome to In Your Business, the place you can go to keep your business in the know. I'm your host as always, Alex Johns, and today we have a very special guest, Cody. So welcome, Cody. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, good to be here.
All right, so today's episode is handling tough feedback and essential playbook. So it's just criticism is a part of business and life, and the way we handle it can either fuel our growth or hold us back. I know getting into UNR's business school was something I didn't plan on doing, and I was criticized on coming here. I was going to go to University of Utah's business school, but I went to their freshman orientation 2 weeks before school started, and it just didn't feel right for me. So I made the decision that coming here and staying in my home state of Nevada, that was met with a lot of criticism, but ended up being ultimately the right choice for me. And that's a very small, low-scale example, but I just wanted to set up an expectation for our discussion that recognizing any kind of criticism, processing, and responding to these feedbacks is just a way to strengthen you.
Yeah, totally. Obviously I'm here, so that means I'm going to UNR in business school as well. And kind of a similar story. I mean, this was really just a backup school for me. I had no real crazy intention of calling UNR my university, but honestly it was pretty cheap, and in terms of criticism, I wasn't really criticized with my decision, but I feel like taking about 5 years to graduate, to be my super senior this year, so that's probably kind of more towards where the criticism kind of lies on my end.
Hey, the educational journey is not linear.
Dude, it's not. It's sometimes up and down. I mean, for me, it kind of went diagonal. Didn't even start as a business major. I decided to choose business because I really didn't know what else to do,
Hey.
I was 2 years in, doing some STEM stuff. I was like, you know what? I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. At least I need a degree, and we'll go from there. So.
Yeah, that's fair, and I feel like a lot of students can relate to that.
Yeah, totally.
They start in their gen eds just not knowing quite what direction they need to go. Hey, people make it to graduation, and they don't know what they're gonna do, and that's okay.
Totally.
And I feel like there's a lot of pressure on, especially in this hustle culture of today, to know exactly what you're doing from the start and how you're going to do it. 5-year plan is so pushed, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
To be prepared and know what you're talking about and where you're going. But also there's so much fruitfulness in enjoying the journey and not knowing 100% where you're going.
Totally. And there's let's get this correct. There's nothing wrong with knowing exactly what you want to do out of high school. I do have a couple of friends who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. Let's do it. Let's get going. And that's good for them. It's how they do it.
Right.
But again, relating to a lot of other people out there where you don't really know what you're going to be doing, it's totally cool just to try to figure it out. I know finances is definitely something that everybody struggles with. I struggle with it as well, but I think the mindset of trying to not listen to what everybody else is telling you and just being okay with taking out a couple of loans, you're going to pay it off in a couple of years, maybe even 1 year if you do land a really good job, so yeah, don't be afraid to not know what you're doing.
Yeah, I feel like that's easier said than done.
So easy, yeah.
I was the person who was had that fast track, had everything planned out in high school, and I graduated high school with my associate's degree. I was so overcompensating for my lack of knowing 100% what I wanted to do. But I thought I was going to be pre-med genetic counselor. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then I started passing out in all the labs I was in, and I couldn't handle any sort of blood or trauma. And I'm like, okay, so that's not going to work out for me.
Yeah.
So I switched over originally to hospital management. So I'm like, okay, if I can't manage people, I can manage people in a business setting. And that's so far worked out, and it's opened so many doors. I feel like business majors are inherently kind of shit on a little bit.
Oh, big time.
Because, like, oh, your homework's a coloring page? Oh, I'm so
sometimes
sorry.
we have, like, little shapes, you know, you have to, like, match the shapes and, like, the proper holes and stuff. That's pretty hard.
Yeah, that's really hard.
Dude, right?
That was, Business 101 was tough on all of us. But, I feel like it's so important to, in your your further early education, to let yourself be receptive to the things you're receptive to. Like, I did not enjoy information systems at all. I'm like, okay, so I don't like computers. I like working more with people, more human resources, more managerial. So I was able to lean at least in some direction. You know what I mean? Because that's important to know what you want.
And you just brought up a good point there where it's important to know that, you know, you can have a plan, whatever, but in terms of having wisdom of knowing what you want to do, you really can't have wisdom until you try something.
No.
You have to try it out. And I know that sounds pretty redundant and pretty simple, but you really just have to experience doing something and figuring out, you know, it's pretty easy to figure out whether or not you want to do it or not and want to keep going forward, like you just said. So
Absolutely.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so valuable beyond the monetary of going to college. Of course, you're paying for it and you're paying for the experiences, but knowing what you enjoy and what you thrive at and where you have capacity for growth is just, like, you can't truly buy that anywhere.
Totally. You got to have this sort of semi-transition from being a kid and having your hand held to still having your hand held a little bit, you know, in college, you know, being told to go to classes, attendance, whatever, but at least having that framework to be able to have like a safety structure where you can branch out and try something and fail at it. You know, that's super important. That's honestly going back to what you're paying for. I feel like that's what you're paying for in college. You're paying for the opportunity to go out and utterly just face plant on your face, and it's like totally fine, you know,
especially those first couple years. Totally. I came in with my first 2 years done, so it was a very unique experience for me, but I was still in like sophomore, junior level classes, so I still got that first step business experience of like, wow, I'm gonna fail at this.
Sure.
I don't know if you were in like those supply chain management, like my math labs. Those made me so mad because there is a formula to it and you won't understand it till you fail at least 10 times.
Yeah, you know, that's actually funny you mentioned supply chain because I didn't take it at UNR.
Oh, you didn't? No,
I did a little study abroad last summer in Spain, and they had a supply chain management course there, and it was like super Excel heavy, bunch of equations.
Yeah.
Thank God their grading system is so much easier than it is here. I still don't really fully understand it, but I got like a C+ in that class in Spain, and so in the US that amounts to like a A- or something like that, which is crazy.
Damn. So take your supply chain management in Spain.
Dude, take it in Spain. Drop the extra $10K and just get those grades up.
Perfect. Yeah, there's no excuses. Just go to Spain. That's so funny. Well, transitioning, I don't know how far you've gone into understanding criticism, but I'd love to turn that over to you.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, you know, big topic that we're talking about today. You know, a big sort of, how would I put it, where being able to understand criticism, it's about like being able to accept feedback, stuff like that. That's like a really big deal, especially when you start jobs and stuff. You know, you want to be able to go somewhere. It kind of goes back to what we were saying where, you know, you try something, doesn't work out, you know, now you have a supervisor telling you, hey, you know, you gotta step up, you gotta figure out a different way to do this, right? You know, there's actual consequences, and that's stepping from the framework of school where sure there's consequences, but it's not really going to the real world. Being able to accept feedback and criticism, super important.
Absolutely. And I think people really struggle with accepting feedback. Let's put it this way. Have you ever done Duolingo?
Dude, yeah.
Okay.
I had to. That's like my link to civilization when I was in Spain trying to figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I did French for years. Okay. And now I'm doing Spanish, and really want to learn Spanish. So I have like a perfect Duolingo score, like level 10, hundreds on everything. I don't know a lick of Spanish. So I just don't understand how that translates. So I was talking to my best friend who is Hispanic, and I'm like, hey girl, like I'm really struggling. Here's what I have to work with. And she's like not easy on me at all.
Nice.
And I think it was even hard for me to accept constructive criticism from my best friend in something I want to be good at. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. I'm better at it now. But taking constructive criticism from someone who is your superior is so much harder.
Totally.
Like
talking about like, criticism sometimes is the ugly truth. It's the elephant in the room that you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of those things where, at least in the moment, you don't want to be explosive and reactionary. You don't want to let your ego take a hit,
Yeah.
And it's going to, you're going to be like, oh man, like, why are you saying that about me? Like, fuck you,
Yeah.
But, it's about sitting with that feedback, hearing like what's happening in your head, just taking a moment to kind of take a couple of deep breaths, not go with the immediate attack, you don't want to match, if there's an energy going on, you want to match like a negative energy going back to you, right? And then, just being able to kind of take it on the chin, and learn something from it.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that it's so easy to take things personally when most of the time in a professional space, it's just business. Like
it's just business.
And they more than likely have developed a professional relationship with you and don't want to tell you that.
Totally.
Or they know they need to.
Yeah.
Like I know in my line of work, staffing is really rough to track because the day-to-day is so up and down. And when I'm training someone and we don't have coverage like where we need it, I've had to like, everyone who's above me in the room has already talked to like our main boss and he just doesn't listen. So I have to be like, hey, there's no coverage. I'm training this person. Neither of these groups feel supported. I need you to help me support them. And they're like, oh, no problem. Bringing it to an unpersonal way is such a skill you have to hone.
Totally.
Because in such a collaborative environment like the College of Business, it's hard not to make things personal.
Yeah. And speaking back on your job too, when you are training somebody, I'm sure you've had the experience of, like you said, you're short-staffed, you don't have support, whatever. So you're like, okay, my trainee, I'm like, I'm gonna have to stop training him for a bit and help them out, kind of go a little bit hardcore. And then this is my question for you is, so you do that, right? I'm sure you've had experiences with your boss where it's like, hey, how's this person, where's this person's progress at for the day or whatever? And you're like, well, I didn't really get to train them, like how do you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, so I've worked at lots of different locations and each one handles it differently. But at my current location, I think that me bringing it up has always been met with like support and positivity just because we have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
But in locations where we don't have the resources to do that, I revise the training plan and I make it not my problem because it isn't.
Sure.
It's not.
Yeah.
I focus on what they are asking me to do, which is training the individual, and I let the people who are higher up that have more power than me deal with the support. While I want to help everyone, I have to compartmentalize.
Something like
that. I have to shift priorities quickly when it comes to training someone because one, you don't want a brand new trainee to be like, wow, they are really unsupportive. And I feel scared that I will also be unsupported. That's priority number one, is to have them not feel like that.
Yeah.
Priority number two is my coworkers, who I very much enjoy, to also feel like that.
Totally.
But they understand that it's a temporary problem and they can thug it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want them to have to.
Yeah.
So I am a hard ass where I need to be.
Fair
and
enough.
I'm respected because of that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. And speaking on, you kind of talk about having support and feeling like you are supported. I mean, that's been a huge theme in the jobs that I currently work at too. in my profession, I work in the ER, and it's kind of one of those things where I have a ton of questions. You know, my first real kind of professional job where there are consequences if you don't do something correctly.
Much higher stakes.
Yeah, I would say there's some pretty high stakes for sure. But what I learned pretty early on was that maybe at times it may feel like you're not being supported in the sense of, you know, there's nobody really holding your hands. But, you know, it's having the courage of being like, hey, I don't know what this means. Can you explain it? Can you elaborate it? You know, I had a, you know, I've been working at one of my jobs now for about 3 months, and it's kind of a weird schedule. It's kind of off and on. It's a per diem kind of deal. And luckily I have some people that, you know, I've been able to establish connections with. And I had a coworker of mine be like, hey, can you ambulate this patient on route air, follow that. And I'm like thinking in my head, like, what the fuck does ambulate mean? And I should totally know what that means, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, in the moment, I was like pretty afraid to be like, to ask, what do you mean by this? Because that person was also training somebody too, you know, and I don't want to look like a fucking dumbass in front of this trainée, you know,
Right.
that probably has more experience than I do, you know.
There's the ego part coming
There's
in.
the ego part coming in, you know, so I was just kind of like, okay, sounds good, you know, and in that moment, I should have asked a question, and like, hey, what do I do? But I, luckily, I had a friend that I worked with there, and I went to him, and I was like, hey man, like, what does it mean? Like, what does this mean, and how would I do it, you know? And then being able to be comfortable at least with somebody.
Sure.
To just be like, hey man, like, I really have no idea what was just told of me. Like, is this even in my ability to do? You know, and it was. Like, it was actually pretty easy. It was actually pretty.
Right. But it's a different
pretty
language
simple
in
thing.
there.
It's a different language for sure, and that's definitely something that I struggle with. You know, definitely daily. You know, I'm not the, you know, I'm not the most experienced person, but I love what I do. You know, so I feel like that goes a long way, and then just being able to care enough to actually ask questions when you feel comfortable to do so.
Absolutely, and I feel like asking those questions and being comfortable in a setting, especially with leaders, reduces burnout.
100%.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Because if you go in there and you're in fight or flight immediately and you feel incompetent, you're not going to want to be there.
Yeah, you know, you get the Sunday scaries, right? You know?
Yeah.
You're going to go into work Monday morning and you're like, dude, I cannot take the anxiety of being here. Like, this sucks. And that comes to not having support. And that also comes to, I guess, kind of full circle back to criticism. It comes back to, okay, if you feel incompetent, are you going to be able to rise up and face those emotions in the moment and truly ask what's on your mind and what's concerning you?
Yeah, it's all about trust. And I feel like if there's trust in a relationship, personal or professional, you'll be able to approach criticism more effectively.
Totally. It's you know, you got to have a toolbox. That's the thing that a lot of therapists talk about. And in my experience with therapy, it's a lot of the people that I've talked to, it's about you need to build a toolbox in your head, obviously, not building like a real toolbox. But speaking on that, your tools are managing those emotions in the moment, taking those deep breaths, being able to sit with your initial reaction, maybe react on it, maybe not, figuring out what's in your best interest and kind of move forward.
Absolutely. And I feel like making that into a more professional toolbox
Totally.
is something that takes skill to hone outside of your college experience.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I think you learn on the job.
Yes.
You know, like you can't learn it in school. You know, you get all the theory, whatever. Not saying that school doesn't give you a good toolbox, it definitely does. But that's certain, I guess, aspect of life you just have to learn on the job.
No, I agree. And I feel like being here and going through business school has helped prepare and take preemptive steps towards that, but you don't truly know until you're there.
That's why I feel like being able to be a part of an internship would be like really important. You know, I never did an internship. I just went right into the workforce because I had to pay, you know, rent and bills and just watch the education expenses stack up,
Yeah.
But, if you do have the opportunity to be a part of an internship, I think that's kind of another one of those where obviously there are consequences, but the expectations of, okay, this is a college student breaking into something for the first time, I feel like you would have a much better support group.
Absolutely. It's almost like a trial period.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially now, internships are such an interesting, almost cultural thing, because it's becoming less and less common for people to take part in internships because of exactly reasons you just said, because education's more expensive, housing is more expensive, just everything is more expensive in general. So people aim to just get those paid as soon as possible, because debt is a fear monger among especially our generation.
Totally.
I feel. But what a privilege to be afforded the opportunity of that. I feel like here at UNR, they're really adamant and give us lots of in college opportunities to seek that out if we so choose.
Totally.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, and because I think they recognize the importance of not just having a person with a piece of paper saying they did 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever.
Right.
I think they understand that to be a successful person, at least in the business world, you have to have that extra toolbox like we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Not just the school box, So,
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to translate, because I've met people in, let's take a classic group project, for example.
Yeah.
I'm a senior, I'm graduating in May. Group projects are still difficult for me because people are at various levels of competency in everything. And you can really tell where someone comes from when you enter a group project.
Yeah.
In the most respectful way. I'm in one right now, in one of my classes. I have a group project in every single class.
Yeah, you have a group project with me, dude.
I
gotta
know.
get started on that.
Yeah, this guy, clearly it's not working out. But one of my classes, it's all girls, great. All the girls in the class banded together, all 6 of us in the 100-person class, which I thought was fun and girl boss until it wasn't. And there's just this one girl in it who drives me crazy. So I was appointed team leader, which happens sometimes, I feel like I have a school box that works well for group projects.
Shout out school box.
You
heard it here first.
But I enter with deadlines and stepped plans and ways to get things done in a timely manner where everyone's ideas are implemented. Okay, sounds great, right?
Totally.
She decided that she was going to take it into her own hands to revitalize this plan that everyone agreed on, and publicly shame me in a group chat for being too assertive, too aggressive, too whatever. And luckily every single other person stood up for me in that group chat.
Nice.
But some people take it personally, even when you don't take things, even if you don't put it in front of them. Just my want to get things done and to be inclusive was threatening to her. And it's really hard to approach people who feel criticized.
Totally. And
as
it
well.
Sounds like what you're dealing with there is you have obviously different expectations for everybody in the group.
Yes.
But a big thing is understanding now that happened, kind of how do you move forward with that? How do you maintain a working relationship? Because, this is the practice for work, right? You're going to have, I'm sure you're going to have people in your job that no matter what you do, you're just not going to be able to see eye to eye on, whether it's personal conflict, whether it's, an ideological conflict with how you're supposed to approach something, whatever, and I think what you're doing right now, it's definitely calling back to how school trained you on things. It's definitely training you for a real life situation that will happen more than once, maybe multiple times throughout your career.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity with training wheels on, for lack of better analogy,
Yeah.
to come together and be forcibly put in a group with someone that does not enjoy me, and to be able to put out work that is professional and well done.
Totally. Yeah.
So I appreciate the opportunity, and it is getting better slowly.
That's good. Yeah.
But I feel that dismissing criticism too quickly can also be damaging to groups.
You know, I was actually going to talk about something similar to that, where, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, this is just school, and I think a lot of people think maybe it's not worth the effort to try to deal with the criticism and just kind of roll over on their bellies and be like, yeah, whatever, you know, like loudest voice wins kind of thing. And that's kind of what it sounds like that person is probably used to, you know? I think it's definitely showing, like, obviously a lot of commitment on your end to kind of move forward and make it more collaborative for everybody, not just have one kind of dictator, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. You know, I have no skin in the game whatsoever, you know. No, like I was saying, it's that is a unique situation that maybe you don't have to deal with at work, because you know, like I said, at school, I mean, the majority of the groups that I've worked with, you know, if somebody is like really adamant on something, even if it's like kind of stupid, like doesn't make any fucking sense, you're just like, you know what, yeah, go ahead and make that slide blue. Like it doesn't
go for it.
Yeah, you know, when in reality, maybe, you know, I mean, I'm like, you know, I'm simplifying this a lot, but maybe, you know, it would look better red, or everybody agrees it should be a different color, or something like that. But you're just kind of willing to roll over and just be like, yeah, because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So, I mean, yeah, props to you for taking on the real world challenge there.
Thank you so much. And I feel like that does translate to like real personal relationships and real professional ones pretty well. Even down to the slideshows, like you're gonna make slideshows and PowerPoints your whole life.
Yeah, especially in business world.
Yeah. And I feel, let some things slide, compromise, of course, it's all part of the collaborative experience, especially if you're in a team-oriented field like supply chain management, information systems, anything tech-dominated, you will have to work with other people.
Yeah.
And that's something that's unavoidable and can be empowering if you know yourself and know your limits. However, there's just such a fine line between just taking criticism, taking too harsh of criticism, without standing up for yourself, without, sorry, I lost my train of thought, without them understanding the complete story, which you do not owe them.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of situations, like, I know in school it's really hard to get times to meet up with group projects. Like, time management is such a focus of college. I feel like that's one of the main skills you accumulate from your school box that will translate to your toolbox.
Yeah.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
But working with other people in time management can be really tricky.
Totally. And you know, what you're saying there, it reminds me of what I think a good manager does. You know, I've had some experience with good managers and bad managers, and the ones that I can always say something positive about, it's, you know, as a manager, you have, you know, some sort of deadline that you have to meet as well, you know? And I think what makes employees not only respect you, but also have a decent time being able to do their work is definitely letting them able to express themselves in their work in some sort of way, being able to have some sort of autonomy, right?
Absolutely.
You want to, as a manager, obviously, you want to have a certain sort of guideline that, you know, everybody has to follow. But speaking back to, you know, creative indifferences, whatever, you know, you want to be able to make sure that the person that is producing a product for you is able to express themselves in some sort of way.
Absolutely.
You know, I feel like a lot more satisfaction comes out of the work, me personally being able to do that, like as someone who's been managed by people, you know, having my own creative you know, inputs and stuff like that, it totally personally ties you to a project, and it makes more of a commitment on your end.
Yeah, and it adds value to your work.
100%.
And people who feel valued and feel important in their workspaces produce higher quality work.
Being able, as a manager, to produce that value, I think that's what, you know, really makes you go above and beyond.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I've had some rough managers and great managers.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what makes the difference.
Yeah.
Is that they care and they provide leniency, not in like a chill whatever goes kind of way,
Yeah.
but in a your thoughts are important, be creative with this problem kind of way.
Yeah, you know,
like that.
one of my previous employments, I used to work for a plasma center, did medical stuff there, and the center manager, one of his key things that he wanted you to know was that if you had an idea, you know, to share it with them. He was very transparent with, you know, certain numbers that needed to be met, and how we need to meet them. And it was really cool when you had that creative input of, you know, even though I'm not a manager, you know, I don't have a master's degree like this guy does, right? But he would take my input on certain situations and be like, okay, how would you apply that? You know, and I think that created a lot of opportunities for him as well to see things from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
You know?
That was probably super empowering for
Yeah.
you.
It was cool.
Yeah. Well, let's take that example, and so our next section is like emotional versus logical reactions. And I feel like in a great boss, that is something that's really easy to separate. Like, oh, like this idea didn't work out. What do you think could have gone better? That's very logical.
Totally.
Versus in a not great manager, hey, this thing that you did sucked.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like being able to separate those is what makes a great employee and great leader and a great boss.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, you brought up a good point there where, you know, speaking back on, as a manager, you have certain deadlines, and maybe when an employee doesn't do something up to standard in terms of lack of commitment, lack of effort, whatever, you know, I'm sure that first reaction is like, you know, like, this sucked, right? Like, you gotta step up your game. Like, you know that you're not putting in the effort that you should be, right? But it's being able to kind of realize, hey, you know, this person probably has a lot going on in their life. You know,
Yes.
This job isn't the only important thing that they have. You know, maybe it's probably the least important thing. You know, maybe they don't care about the job at all.
Right.
But it's your job to figure out how to support that person in a way that is also going to support your objective.
Absolutely. Well put.
Yeah.
And a good manager that has that train of thought pauses before acting in any way, right? So for me, I used to work with like really little kids, and it's really important because they're so susceptible to like anything you put off, they will absorb so fast. So if you're cool, they're cool.
Totally.
So if they're fighting with each other, you can't approach with aggression or any kind of like panicked urgency. You just have to be like, hey guys, like what's going on?
Yeah.
Why are we fighting? And then they'll level themselves. And not to compare that to the business world, but let's compare it to the business world.
Yeah.
If you approach your employees that are clearly stressed with equal or greater stress, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, they're gonna get more stressed out. It's gonna be an explosive reaction, of course.
So you have to pause, process, and then react. I feel that also directly translates to any relationship that you will ever have. If you act quickly and without processing anything you're taking in, it's not going to end well, and you're going to, the rawest emotion you have will be what's reflected.
Yeah.
And that's not usually the best thing. It can be helpful in some situations, like if you're having fast brainstorms and you just are spitting out ideas, great. But if you have a high stress situation, which you obviously experience daily, do you pause, assess, then react?
I mean, easier said than done,
Right.
right? I think I've definitely caught myself being very reactionary.
Sure.
But I think there's also a way to be reactionary and be productive at the same time.
Absolutely.
You know, it's definitely with my job, things can change on a whim. You know, you can have somebody that's totally fine hanging out with you talking, and then 2 seconds later they're on the floor with no pulse. You
Right.
know, I mean, hopefully they're on the floor. You know, hopefully you catch them or you're just on
Right.
a gurney or something like that, right? But that's happened before. You know, and in terms of the reactionary being productive, it comes down to muscle memory, comes down to training, comes down to rigorous protocols that, you know, seem really boring to learn, but there's a reason why they're there. You know, it's because it helps you help the person that needs your assistance 100%, you know. And that goes back to going back to the school box term, you know, learning the theory and stuff. You might not see a relevancy in it now. You know, it's like the you know, it's what everybody talks about with math, right? Like, oh, when are we ever going to use this in the outside world? That's fair. Like, I understand that.
Right.
But it's one of those things where you get what you put in, and a lot of these management classes, you know, we do have study projects that we have to do, and maybe we're learning about stuff sometimes that we're just like, okay, I fail to see any sort of relevancy, right? But maybe you're dealt with a moment where you have to be reactionary. You know, you don't have a choice in that matter, and that's where the training kicks in, where the theory kind of kicks in, where, you know, maybe in the moment you're not realizing, oh yeah, I learned this in Management 470 compensation. This mixed strategy policy is going to really help out with this conflict. I mean,
Right.
there might be people out there that think like that, but you know,
Right.
it's really going to be almost an instinctual reaction, and you have to make a quick decision.
Absolutely.
You know? And that's where the training comes into play, right?
And I feel like even now there are classes that I took in my first semester that have really translated.
Totally.
And at the time, I was like, hey, when am I going to use this management theory or this way to handle conflict? And here I am in my group projects, literally spelling it out to a T. And that might be just like subconscious, but it probably is the fact that I was trained that way.
It 100% is, you know, I mean, I think we all think it's subconscious, but it's, if you're exposed to something long enough and you learn it, it's going to stick into your subconscious.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I feel like having the capacity, especially in a field of work like yours, to almost humble yourself and say, okay, these trainings are going to save me stress and almost like directly save people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a really effective way to pause, process, and then act before things happen.
Sure, yeah, being able to mitigate all the risks before seeing all the potential problems that can play out and doing your best to eliminate those possibilities.
Absolutely.
For sure, I think that's what a good health care provider does.
Yeah.
It's also very empowering too, you know, knowing that you're able to depend on yourself in a very high stress situation. I mean, obviously I'm at the very beginning of my career. I have plenty to learn and to build upon, but it is pretty cool in those small moments where the training does kick in and you're like, wow, okay, I can depend on myself in this situation.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And I feel like the ability that you have to take that training and be able to reflect on it after and not just take it for what it is important.
Totally.
Because you're not going to truly learn anything if you don't go back and reflect on it,
Yeah.
especially in such ever-changing fields.
Yeah.
Which is what we will both be in,
Totally.
because everything is always changing.
Yeah, you know, and that's why I'm so drawn to like the hands-on stuff too, because it is, in a sense, you know, the theoretical knowledge is very important, but when you get a chance to apply it, that's where, for me, something really sticks, you know, and then that repetition of doing the same thing over and over and over again, to where something that seemed so hard when I first started the job, it's like, oh yeah, you know, that's second nature now, that's subconscious now, you know?
And like, how cool is that to look back on?
It is pretty cool.
And it's super
yeah.
motivating
Yeah.
to visually see how far you've come. Like, you
Yeah.
probably have stats at your work, so you could actually see it in charts.
Mm-hmm.
But in like personal development, that's equally as important.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, turning more back to like next steps after college, we're graduating.
Totally.
It's been great, but
It's scary though.
I know, there's just so many options
Yeah.
that you can really turn in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even now you're in this ER setting,
Mm-hmm.
you have the option to turn any way at any time.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up. The past month and a half, 2 months, I kind of took a step back from work. Very grateful I was able to do that for my schedule and stuff, but definitely racked up a bit of debt. I spent a lot of time kind of reflecting on what I want to do once I graduate. And it was scary, I felt very directionless, even though I've been kind of building up a decent resume and getting some decent experience. That sort of mental strength and that kind of mental situation of, damn, like, what do I do, is kind of eating me up inside a little bit,
Yeah.
And I think what was really important for me, I figured this out literally like in the last week and a half. There's all these directions you can take. What you need to do is put your feet down, start on a path, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like that's what I finally decided to do. For me personally, I had kind of had two options that I was playing with. Whether I want to go into nursing school or whether I want to go more emergency medicine in terms of like being a firefighter and stuff like that, right? I finally decided, okay, I'm going to put my feet on the ground, kind of narrow down the viewpoint, and just work towards one objective goal. And I think having the goal of eventually becoming a firefighter, that's what I ended up deciding that I want to pursue, really kind of straighten things out and reset my priorities and my goals. And now that I know I'm working towards something that I really want to do, it's really sort of helped with that mental health bit of being directionless and kind of feeling hopeless. Now I'm working towards something,
which is not an uncommon thing to experience.
Totally.
When you're almost graduating and last year, even like the months after you graduate, it's kind of a little bit existential, like, wow, the world is so big, I'm so small in it, nothing I do will matter.
Yeah.
But then turning around and investing in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it sounds like you were doing.
Yeah.
And what do I want? What will improve my quality of life? What interests me? What do I want to invest this energy in?
Yeah.
Makes yourself feel more centralized in
More
your
grounded.
life. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's the word I wanted.
Totally, it's taking your focus. My focus was out here, kind of, the spotlights were out in the open, kind of searching for something, right?
Yeah.
And not to get like super theoretical with it or whatever, but then once I sort of took spotlights and focused internally, that's where I was able to kind of get to the nitty gritty of figuring out, okay, now let's go work towards something.
Absolutely. I feel like when you have such a wide scale, it's hard to work in any direction. It's hard to move. It's hard to progress in any way. And it's not a selfish thing to center and ground yourself. Because if you are not feeling like your needs are met, like you're safe, like you're progressing, like you are trusted, how are you to return that energy to your friends, your family, your employer? You can't. So I think it's so important to invest in yourself and your relationships and your mental health. So important. And it's a little bit stigmatized, but it's getting less so.
Totally.
With every few years, I feel like it's more comfortable to talk to my friends and coworkers. Oh, I learned whatever in therapy, and I'm like, wow, that's actually really helpful. I'm glad you were comfortable enough to share that with me. Hey, I'm having like a really hard time with this, and this, when that wasn't a thing 10 years ago.
Dude, totally. It's a total generational change that's been amazing.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm just speaking on that, our parents' generation, like mental health, what is something wrong with you? You're going to a therapist. That was totally the vibe, 100%. And it still is with them, unfortunately. But with that being said, I have seen steps in, my personal life with my parents of them actually being open to, okay, maybe let's try this out. Let's see what all the hype is about,
See what all the hype is
right?
about.
I mean, I don't think my dad has ever said hype, right? But, it's cool seeing, I just spent some time with him for the past couple of days. It's cool seeing that even our parents now are able to try to figure something out with a therapist.
Absolutely. And having your thoughts and mental health be at almost a standstill and being willing to dig back into that is really impressive.
It is.
I know like my parents' generation is slightly more open to that, but it's my grandparents that are like, oh, like maybe not, like take a walk, get in the sun, which is valid.
Go
advice.
outside, eat a banana,
right.
Get some sunshine.
Which is a valid take. But when that is no longer helpful, I always want someone to feel like they can have more than that. Because there's more than that now. Because in their generation, like, no one was on, like, antidepressants. Like, not no one. People were, not to discount them at all. But it just wasn't a talked about thing. It just wasn't talked about or normalized in any manner. And mental health is something that every single person has and is on a different spot on their path of it. So it's just so important to have that be an open conversation with people that you trust. And I feel like sometimes that might not be your family, sometimes that might not be your friends or your coworkers, but having some relationship in your life where you can freely talk about your victories, your wins, like your achievements, but also your goals that you're falling short on, things that are bothering you, things you want to expand on, is an empowering and necessary thing for every individual.
Yeah, you're speaking on the importance of having a support group, 100%. That's totally something that I feel like everybody needs, and it's hard sometimes, people might not think they're getting the support they need. Maybe they don't have that many friends that they can depend on, stuff like that. And it really is one of those things where personally I've gone through, it's being able to slowly allow yourself to be vulnerable. And that's when people who want to help, who care about you, gravitate towards you.
Absolutely. And it is about being vulnerable and being open to that side of yourself, because if you don't let people see that or invite you in, they're not going to know.
They're not going to know there's a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the thing, oh, they should have known this, they should have known that. No one owes you to read your mind. That's not a reasonable expectation at all.
Yeah.
And it is your job to allow yourself to be in a position to be supported if you need it.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely something that you have to train yourself to allow yourself to feel. I kind of said a bunch of words there, but
no, I'm following.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those situations where in order to be successful, in order to use your school box correctly, you got to have the support.
Yes, and I feel like if you feel supported, like your needs are met, and like you're contributing to a valuable work, you will be able to handle falling short, failing, and handling criticism.
Totally.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Amazing, I love it. Well, perfect. So not all criticism is created equal. Reacting emotionally won't always help, and real growth comes from listening to the right feedback, and that might be your own. If you had one piece of advice to young professionals going out, like starting their school journey or their professional journey, what would you say?
It's 100% okay to fail. To have a direction that you think you're going towards, and then to be halfway through it and be like, yeah, fuck this sucks. It's okay to start down a path and to jump to another one, to figure something else out. It's also okay to take a pause and to really figure out where you're going to go next, you know. I would say I'm fortunate in the way where I do have the ability to, like I said, that past month and a half to be able to just kind of drop everything I'm doing and use the credit card more than I should, you know. I'm very fortunate for that, and I think being able to work towards a space where you can allow yourself to take some time if things aren't going right, you know. That's, I think, one of the key takeaways that I would tell somebody is, you know, it's okay to fail, and it's okay to not really know what you're doing. It's also okay to try new things.
Absolutely. And bouncing off of that, while it is okay to fail, while it is okay to explore different opportunities, that doesn't mean you take the easy route and you never work hard and you never self-motivate and get through things to become great. That's something that I want to make so clear, is that there's never going to be a path that you will be successful at and feel valued and make other people feel valuable in that will not be hard at some point.
Totally.
So
take chances.
Take
put yourself
chances.
out there.
Yes, take these skills that you hone and things you feel passionate about and make yourself successful because of them. And never stop growing. And growth is painful, and growth comes with criticism, and growth comes with pains. And moving through those and having the capacity to build from them, that's what it's about.
Totally.
That's what will make you the best version of yourself, personally, professionally, for your relationships, just in every way.
Well said.
Thank you. So criticism is inevitable. The way you handle it will define your success. And tag yourself in the comments what's the best or worst criticism you've ever experienced and how did you handle it to become a better person. So you can find us at In Your Business Envy on Instagram, Spotify, and here on YouTube. And thank you so much for being here, Cody. It was a pleasure. See you next time on In Your Business. Bye.
Bye.